And we are back at long last, Taylor. We put out an episode last week that was a great conversation that we had with the folks over at the Touring Families podcast. Dave over there interviewed us, and that was a nice time. But it's been quite a while since you and I sat down together behind a microphone just to rap about this stuff.
Yeah, your records indicate it's been about...
Keep going, mental math.
21 days.
Ish. Yeah, something like that. Since we recorded live. Yeah, I think it has been that long. And I think, full disclosure, it's been for kind of good reason, I think. I mean, I don't think anyone would expect us to go above and beyond recording podcasts when life was making demands of us. But life has been pretty demanding in the last few weeks, I would say. Our normal recording schedule got messed up by something awesome, which is that we've been skiing on Mondays.
When we usually record, true. We did a little homeschool ski club thing. It's been great.
We did, but outside of that, things have hit the fan in some regard. Just to give a few examples, I hesitate to make this a full-on complaint of the week episode.
No, it's going to be productive, though, because it's going to fuel the episode.
It is, and I think to lay the groundwork here, our goal for this episode is to be real for a few minutes and talk about the fact that, life isn't always just perfect, even on the other end of your podcast to the people you listen to. And also just to give some kind of insight into how we work through times like these, because now having been married for 10 years and together for 16, 17, whatever. I don't know,
it's close enough.
17,
sounds good.
Something like that. There's been ups and downs for sure. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily a down period, but it is a turbulent period. Right?
Yeah, it's nothing terrible or traumatic is going on, but there's just a lot of things shifting and changing and a lot of things up in the air and kind of questioning what the next steps are. And so we thought it would be kind of nice to just turn on the microphone and talk about what we've been navigating, especially because I think we know, and you know if you're listening, that there's always going to be like a hard time or a turbulent time that comes up, right? Nobody lives a life with no hiccups or problems or anything like that. And so if we can share a little bit about how we've been navigating this time ourselves as a family, maybe it will spark an idea for you if you're going through something, or in the future, you might think of it when you do go through something that's a little harder. Yeah.
And you know what it really reminds me of, actually?
What?
It reminds me of about 8 years ago when we were first coming to the ideas of wanting to parent in a different way than we had anticipated. And we realized that lifetime, or that lifestyle a lifetime ago, it feels like, wasn't congruent with how we wanted to live. Right. And so I remember there was this extended period where we were like, what are we going to do?
What's next? Like, we have to make a change, but what is it going to be?
Right. Like, we lived in New Jersey at the time. And I think we talked about this in our first episode, actually. If you ever wanted to go back and listen to that, get a little insight into our story. I think we talked about how basically once we decided that we couldn't parent in the way that we had anticipated, which basically meant sending our kids to school, whether they wanted to go or not.
Probably relatively authoritarian, loving, of course.
Yeah, but being a dual income family where the kids were off and we were working. Both of us, when we realized that wasn't going to work, that was terrifying. And it was like a lot of Googling and soul searching and walking with the dog and listening to podcasts and engaging new media.
Well, I didn't listen to podcasts back then. You were on the cusp.
Yeah, you were just a babe in swaddling clothes at the time.
I was just busy.
You're younger than I am, so it makes sense that you come to some of these things.
Those 18 months are really a lot.
Yeah, well, I can remember being your age. And
I know.
It was a tough time, but actually it was kind of golden age, being your age. But yeah, so for me, I think the first step whenever times like these come up is to just like look at them for a second, recognize that it was a really weird pronunciation of recognize, by the way.
I didn't notice.
I said recognize that it's uncomfortable to think about changing, especially having to change something pretty fundamental in your life, and sit with that and know that that part of you that's telling you that this feels uncomfortable right now is okay. That's and I'm spoiling something that I've been getting really into recently, which is this internal.
I knew it was coming.
You know it was coming. But there's this internal family systems methodology of therapy, actually.
We talked about it a little bit with Fiona Griffin when we interviewed her on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. But I've been schooled on it a little bit recently, and I've been going deeper, reading more and more about it. But just being comfortable with this part of me that feels uncomfortable during times of transition, recognize that part of me wants to protect me from making any rash decisions or to risk too much or whatever. but ultimately trusting the rest of me to make good decisions, to try and really try to find clarity around what my values are and what's going to work for all of the different kind of demands that the modern life places on us, right? No particular order, something like being able to pay the bills, lead a purpose-driven life, and to try to create the life you want for your kids. It's hard to get a 10 out of 10 on all three of those things at any given time, right? So yeah, that's kind of...
Well, I think that's important, being able to sit in the discomfort, and having gone through other uncomfortable or challenging times, you start to learn that it's going to change eventually, right? The situation is going to change. We are going to try something new. We're going to eventually land on whatever that next thing is that feels good. So I think having trust that that is going to come and that it hasn't come yet, and being able to be, like you said, kind of comfortable with the discomfort is really important, instead of like bare knuckling your way through it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important.
Bare knuckling? White knuckling?
White knuckling. Yeah. White knuckling is like holding on. Bare knuckling is like a gruesome fight.
I think I meant bare knuckling then. I think I was right.
Really? No, I think white knuckling is like, you're like holding on tight.
I don't know.
It's an intense ride.
I shouldn't use analogies, I think.
Yeah, you've been known to mix a metaphor or two in your day.
Oh, it's a metaphor.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we're off to a good start. That actually distracted me a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Still friends. Plus more. We're like married as well. Not just friends, but
friends plus.
Friends plus. Okay. Back on track. So this also, I think, relates to, we saw a post like this in our One for Your Family group recently, and it's a common theme. I think it's something a lot of people go through just in the New Year's. This is like the New Year's, plural. In the new year, we're a mess. We're recording at nighttime, by the way, in case you can't tell, which is always happens to us. But I think it's a common New Year thing too. So maybe this is kind of like resolutions or like life changes discussion at its core. But yeah, so for us, I'll give you some deets in case you're curious. We talked about on the podcast ages ago, I think, and I don't know if we gave any updates on this, but we had bought a camp, a summer camp program, not the whole facility. That would have been even worse had the next thing happened. But
bought the business.
We bought the business, and the business failed in magnificent fashion, is the way I would put it. And without boring you with all the gory details, our vision originally was to get involved in this camp that was going to close and
try to bring it back to life.
Breathe the life back into it, and kind of also reinvigorate that summer camp program with a lot of the things that we've seen work with some of our work with Stomping Ground and Vanderkamp before that. And it went about as badly as possible in every possible respect. So I think I've talked to individuals about this, but certainly never talked publicly about it. And for me, this was the first domino to fall in this period of transition for me, because it really, life has a way of doing this for you, where it really taught me all sorts of things about myself that I would have rather not known. Like the fact that I couldn't, or I failed to execute on this one particular vision. The fact that I probably was too self-assured walking into it. Like I didn't properly assess the risks going into it. And there were just a number of things like that pointed out some pretty significant flaws in the way I go about things, at least from a business perspective, if not a personal one. And it was just hard as hell. I mean, it was extremely expensive. It was a terrible financial blow, but also just emotionally draining. Like the camp, the folks that were involved in the camp kind of had bad feelings towards me and the folks that I brought in to get involved in the first place. And, I got taken to small claims court by one of the parents after the fact because she wanted a refund. So I had to fly down to Washington, D.C. here from New Hampshire.
Just a couple weeks ago.
That was a couple weeks ago. And that was like the real bottom of this time of transition for me, having to fly down there. And it's a frivolous claim as well. So just a really painful and frustrating experience. But so that domino falls, and alongside of that, the industry that my other business is involved in, the daily fantasy sports industry, has also been on a tough trajectory in the last 12 months or so. So yeah, business wise, and money is a big thing for a lot of folks, I guess, but business wise, 2018 was really bad. Yeah. I don't know how else to put it. Like we've crafted this lifestyle in such a way that you and I can split time and split time working and split time hanging out with the kids. Plus, I would say, we get a lot of family time. That's a hugely important value to us. And these various businesses having the difficulties that they have has really made it a lot more difficult to feel comfortable just proceeding business as usual, right?
Right.
So,
like sticking with the schedule that we were living with week to week when the businesses were in a different place, right? It felt comfortable to have as much family time as we did because we were doing okay in that regard.
Well, right. When money is like no object, it's hard to be too stressed out about too much. Like when you've got enough money and you pretty much have the time to do the things that you care about, at least for me personally, then not much else really gets me down. But when that starts to become more challenging, then everything else, and I think this is a self-awareness piece for me, but I think it's probably true for a lot of people when it's like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs situation. When there's insecurity or difficulty in one area of life, it's hard for that not to flow into other areas, right? Whether it's your partnership or your parenting relationships or whatever else, right? So, so that was a big piece for me. And I think alongside of that, you and I were just trying to really sit down and distill once again. I think what the other thing that turbulent times cause you to do is like have to prioritize, right? Because when everything is great, you don't really need to pick one thing at the cost of another.
Exactly.
But we are kind of transitioning into that time where we're like, okay, we could, like you've been talking about taking on more births as a doula.
Right.
Well, there's a cost to that for our family, right? Having you around less.
And having us all kind of be on call, right? For whenever I get called out to attend people when they're in labor, that's a lot for the family.
Right. Or taking risks on new businesses, which can have great returns in the long run, but creates a period of uncertainty where there's very little money coming in and very little security whatsoever. That's actually kind of the position we were in when we first moved to New Hampshire in 2014. We were transitioning away from a very secure financial situation running camp and kind of launching these multiple businesses at the same time and seeing what was going to stick. But it's a scary thing to do.
I think it makes you want to stop and go back and appreciate how good it is when it's really good. And I think I'm getting better at that in my life, at really cherishing the good when it's good. But as we were sitting down and looking at 2019 and thinking, okay, we have some major shifts coming in the way that we think about how our family is going to earn the amount of money that we feel comfortable earning to kind of continue to support our kids to be home with us and have us, at least one of us, with them most of the time and all of these things. We did have to start to think about like how that might look like, maybe a little bit less all together family time, or just like what things we're going to have to shift and change. And like you said, James, like which things we were going to hold fast to as priorities and which we might have to compromise on for a while.
Yeah. And this, again, reminds me of that parenting discussion that was going on in the One Free Family Facebook group, where it's like, sometimes that perfect solution isn't just, you can't just like look around and find it a lot of times.
Bing, that's it.
Oh, here we are. Yeah. And a lot of times there is no perfect solution. It means you're going to have to look at the things, even if you feel like you've pared down your list and cut your priorities to the bone, you still might not be able to.
Something still might have to give it, even if just for a while. It's funny. It actually reminds me of when I am working with people who are pregnant, and maybe especially if they have some like extra circumstances or factors that are making their potential birth a little bit more risky or challenging. And sometimes, or a lot of times, the people I work with are in a situation where like they have options A, B, and C, and none of those options feel awesome.
Right.
And it could be with birth, or it could be with like a decision for different sorts of like newborn treatments that your newborn is offered at the hospital. Whatever it is, it could be options of providers in your area. I talk to people about how let's find the best option possible. And let's also recognize in this exact situation, as we have seen all the options, none of these feels perfect to you, right? That seems clear. So let's look at them and decide which one keeps you most closely aligned with what is most important to you.
Right. Because I think a lot of times when you're faced with a potential solution like that, it's tempting to do nothing, right? Because you're like, well, here I am. I don't see the good solution, so why don't I just like keep hanging out and hoping it gets better?
Or like hanging, in my case, a lot of times it's like hanging out and just continuing to feel really, really crappy about it, right? And to kind of have that like low level, just like nervousness or anxiety or discomfort just kind of like swirling around while I'm trying to live my day-to-day life.
Right. And I think, in the case of, it's funny, life isn't exactly like a pregnancy in this way, but like the baby's coming whether you make a plan or not, right?
Yeah.
So like
days keep on passing.
Chances are good that if as days pass, the less you do to really distill what it is you really want, the less likely you are to come anywhere close to that, right? And so I think, like for us, it's actually an exercise we went through when we were having our second kid, I think, or maybe it was our first one. Well, when did we do childbirth ed classes?
Our first,
yeah. But they were like, make a list of your top 40 things that you want from your birth. And you like made the list. And they're like, okay, now get rid of 35 of those because you're just probably not going to get all top 40.
Because you're also just not in control of everything,
exactly.
Right?
And life is that way too. So when we get in this position, I think the first thing we try to do is recognize that if we just continue marching on without sitting with it, the discomfort and the looking at the budget and looking at all that stuff, that like we'll be a lot more likely to make a bad decision or to wind up in an unsatisfying situation if we don't walk toward it rather than duck from it. So for me, I have a few different strategies for walking towards things like this, and I suppose everyone's different, but whenever I feel like I'm in a rut or in this time of turbulence, I really try to work hard to just start engaging new things. So like I've been volunteering at this local self-directed learning community called Big Fish, right? So it's not a school. It's basically like a homeschool drop-off program, I guess.
Yeah, it's a self-directed learning center.
For teenagers. Yeah, everyone might not know what that really means, but basically it's a place, there's grown-ups there. They do offer some classes. There's 20 to 30 teenagers at any given time.
Everything is voluntary. Take the classes you want. Don't take the ones you don't.
And the kids have advisors, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, recognizing that some change was coming in my life, knowing that this was somewhat nearby and
it really aligns with, with our values.
With what I care about when it comes to interacting with kids. I was like, I should just call, it's Diane. She's a good friend of mine now, but call Diane and just like see if there's an opportunity to volunteer, right?
Yeah.
And for me, just going there has ignited so many different thoughts in my mind, right? So that's actually one of the teenagers there is the one that turned me on to this internal family systems that I've been really excited about. I've actually considered and potentially might even try to get more involved there in the future, even in potentially a professional capacity. And I don't know, but getting outside of, like for me, when things feel really hard and turbulent, I know that if I just keep doing the same things every day, then my anxiety builds. There's no release valve.
Yeah, you kind of just keep sinking further and further.
Yeah. So in the old days, 9 years ago, it was watching unschooling videos online or watching these documentaries like Surfwise and whatnot.
Taking a Master Gardener's class.
Yeah, that's true. I completed my Master Gardener's class, but not the volunteer requirement. So technically, as people like to remind me, I'm not actually...
You're not a full-on Master Gardener.
Official Master Gardener. But yeah, just like... Because I guess like it's so hard for me to even know what's going on, like in my unconscious, right? When I'm like, all I know is there's this big feeling of anxiety, and I can loosely point to where that might be coming from, but like, I don't know, I really get reinvigorated or turned back on by new stimulus in my life.
Just engaging your brain in a different way. I think sometimes that even lets you kind of take some space from what it is that's causing the anxiety, where you can kind of like come back to it, and all of a sudden you do have these like new thoughts or ideas about it because you've just given it some room to breathe and done something else for a while. And something fulfilling and exciting. It
reminds me of when I was really learning a lot about poker, and I read this article, and it was talking about areas of emphasis, and it was basically like it was making the case for expert poker players to play other games, with the idea being that you play other games as well, because there are going to be concepts that are important across all these games. But for instance, in like bridge, let's say, a certain concept might be like so important that you have to learn a ton about it. And then you bring that concept back to poker where it's less important, but still valid. And you become an expert in this like niche area. And for me, living life is this way, where there's all these different, all these different things to demand our attention, all these different things we care about, parenting, our careers, our physical health, et cetera, et cetera. But the big thing is that sometimes we need to, I'm losing my train of thought here, but basically the idea is like, with all of these things vying for our attention, sometimes going deep in something unexpected can teach us things that we bring over to other aspects of our life, if that makes sense. So the payoff wasn't really there for that long diversion.
No, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate your affirmation. but yeah, so for me anyway, half of the coin is mixing up my life, trying to take on some sort of new things, keep things fresh. And then the other half, though, is the exact opposite. And this is something that you and I have been doing a lot recently, which is going super deep on the things we're already doing to kind of figure out what needs to stay, what are the non-negotiables,
right, and
what is actually, negotiable or can go.
Yeah, just really looking at kind of the situation we're in and where we would like to be. And yeah, what you said, like what priorities are non-negotiable. So for us, we're going to pretty much do anything before we say, well, we just both have to go back to work full time and send the kids to school, right? Like that's a big priority for our family. Our kids are clear on the fact that they like to be home and that they like freedom to spend their days in the ways that they want. So that's something that we are kind of holding as a priority. Now, that doesn't mean their life might not change a little bit, right? Like you said, as they get older, if you got more involved with Big Fish or something, maybe they would be there a little bit because that would be the safe place for them if nobody is home or things like that. But that priority of giving them the space to be self-directed is kind of at the top for us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, actually another helpful exercise for me, I don't remember where I learned this, but it's thinking of the worst case scenario. Maybe I learned this from the Fizzle podcast, actually, but it's like, if I really let myself go down the rabbit hole and be realistic about the worst thing that could possibly happen based on this turbulent period in my life, in this particular instance, it's actually not that bad. Worst case scenario is probably something along the lines of one or both of us has to work full time. And if that is somehow an impossibility, it's like, and we're lucky to be in a position like this, it'd be like moving in with one of our parents, We would really not want to do that. Like we really like to have a house that is just us and our kids. And like that, we would be living. We would still be able to hold on to the things that are the most important to us in a scenario like that, right? And I don't know, going down that deep and thinking about even something that would be pretty unpleasant, and it would be obviously really defeating to have to go rely on people that I believe I'm independent from now. Even that, though, it's like not that bad. Like it still is totally workable situation that is better than a lot of people have it in the world.
Yeah, right? And that's actually a pretty tried and true method for kind of getting to the root of worries and fears and anxieties, is like following it to that worst case scenario and thinking, how would I handle that? Because if you can wrap your head around what that would look like, some of the desperation around how you're feeling can dissipate, because you could think, okay, I can survive that. And then you clear up some space for yourself to start strategizing more around what the best next steps actually are going to be, so that you can kind of get to the place that you would love to be.
Right. Yeah. That's very, very well put, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I'm thinking about areas of emphasis too, and thinking about how, like, right around this time, you also found out about the KonMari thing, right? Where you were going and like holding all your objects and...
Oh, I went for it.
Yeah, you did. But that actually, it's like a KonMari of our life and our priorities, right? It's like, but I think unsurprisingly, you went to that thing, which is basically about tidying up and...
Oh yeah, that's my go-to stress reliever.
Cleaning, yeah, stress cleaning. But in this case, the concepts from that I think are pretty sound. Like, is this object bringing me a lot of joy right now? If it's not, then I can set it aside. I think life can be that way too.
Yeah,
is
definitely.
This work project or side hustle I'm working on, is this bringing me joy? What is it bringing me right now? Really viewing everything in your life and getting back to basics, I think, is a super powerful practice. And then I think, letting go and realizing that a lot of times some of these things, a few things, some of these things are not our fault, so you can't beat yourself up about it. And some of these things are outside of our control, so we can't beat ourselves up about it. And then basically just all of this work is to try to create an environment that is one where the creative thinking necessary to find the next thing is possible.
Is possible and can be accessed,
Yeah, because I can say, like, my turbulent time, at least career-wise, the last one, was when I was quitting playing poker the first time. The last transition went pretty naturally, but that was a really long process. It was like a 2-year process for me, probably, of trying to envision what the next thing was going to be in my life. And I don't think it had to be that long, I guess. It's just that I was the perfect is the enemy of the good, I guess, is another cliche I'll throw in there, where it's like, where nothing feels perfect. Okay, well, I'm not going to do anything.
Right. I'm paralyzed.
Exactly. So I'd love to transition this, if you're okay.
Depends where you're going.
Into the discussion that was brought up in our Facebook group about when you're trying to parent in a certain way. And
oh, no, I'm not ready yet.
You're not ready?
No.
Okay, go.
Well, I just wanted to share a couple other things that I think I have done through this time to kind of...
Yeah, go.
I don't know, to support myself and care for myself and for the family. And one of them is just recognizing that we are in a time of transition and a time of questioning and kind of uncertainty. I have actually worked really, really hard myself to give myself permission to set down a lot of the things that I typically kind of like worry about on a day-to-day basis. So, and a lot of those things just relate to, you know, I know I have this podcast and maybe sometimes it seems like it's easy over here, but I still worry a lot about like, are our kids spending their time in the best way possible? Are we creating a rich enough environment? Did this kid get this thing that they needed and this kid? And are we going enough places? Are they seeing their friends enough? You know, like all of these things that run through my mind on at least a weekly basis, if not more often. I've actually been working really hard during this time to let go of those things and to control what I can control, which is I know that I can just stay in connection with my kids. And that's something that I've been working really hard on. Like I specifically, like one example even, but I've been doing this on a general level. One example was like yesterday, you took the oldest to basketball and I was home with the other two. And I was like looking around the house, just feeling like, oh my God, this place is a mess. We need to clean up. Nobody can get into anything interesting because it's so messy. But instead I was like, no, I have an hour and a half with the two younger kids. I'm just going to go all in and just like really spend some quality time with them because I saw the gift of just having one less kid around. Not that I don't love having them all around, but the gift of being able to give the other two a little more of me. And we just like played and had fun for an hour and a half. And I know like that's not possible all the time, but I think it's all to say that I'm starting to learn that the more I let myself stay in a place of kind of like worry about, is this enough? What does the future bring? The less time I have to connect with my kids. So instead, when I feel those things creeping in, instead I've just like gone and found a kid to try and see what they're up to or connect with them. And that for me has actually been a really good way to kind of buoy myself through this time because I know when I go to bed at night, I can at least say, okay, like I connected with the kids today. I did my best to stay patient with them, even in the midst of kind of this turbulence. And it's also really actually pretty fulfilling to connect with your kids, right? So that's something that has really, really helped me, just stay positive during this time. And it feels like a good thing to be able to, just a good way to get through.
Well, it's been pretty neat because you have been doing this, I'd say, better than I have been in the last 3 weeks anyway. And it really reminds me of something that I would teach my summer camp counselors, which is like when there are things that are outside of your control, and there's so many things outside of your control, one thing you actually are in control of every day is how you interact with others, right? And so the people as parents that you probably interact with the most are your own kids.
Yeah.
And so in spite of, us being in these conversations mostly at nighttime when everyone's asleep, our kids, I think, have not really noticed that much. Like they're still doing great, actually. They're up to stuff and thriving and learning new things. And when I talk to them especially the older guys at the end of the night, when I'm brushing their teeth and whatnot, because that just happens to be our routine, they can always reflect on a bunch of great things that happened during the day.
Yeah.
And I think that they are noticing that you are taking that intentional above and beyond approach. And I think, it's like whatever else is going on in your life, recognize that in each moment you probably do have the opportunity to just stick your neck out there and try.
Yeah, and I would also say too, like the more that I work on it and the more that I do it, the less it feels like it's an above and beyond thing because it just becomes more natural and it becomes easier and it also like fills me up too, right? It's not like I just feel like I'm giving. I'm also just really enjoying being with them. So that for me has really just been so helpful.
Well, and I think, if you can get to that place mentally, then you're really firing on all cylinders. But I think it's also like time spent with your kids. Kids' needs tend to be a lot less complex than the needs to maintain a functioning adult life. It's like, mostly it's
it's almost like a little escape sometimes too, to just do their thing with them.
Sure. Well, and it's like they just want to be seen and heard and like have some fun and get food and whatever, go to the bathroom occasionally. And I think, right, it can be that cleansing process almost of like,
sure,
why don't we just sit and play hide and seek and like hear them giggle when they find me?
And I don't have to think about the other stuff for a while because we're just having fun together. Yeah.
Great point. Was there other stuff you wanted to dive into on this before
No, I think you can proceed.
Cool. Well, this is a better transition anyway, I think, which is to say sometimes these feelings, so in our case, the turbulent feelings have been surrounding work-related stuff, but I think a lot of people who are trying to parent more intentionally have this like impending feeling of difficulty around their intentional parenting choices, right? And these conversations are they're in our One Free Family Facebook group, but they're all over parenting discussions all over the internet, which is my kid is going through insert problem here or insert phase here. Right now I'm parenting in this way, but I'm worried that if I don't change something, that my kid is not going to be okay, basically, right? So
to clarify, you mean like we're going through a hard time in our family with a kid or multiple kids, and I'm worried that it could possibly because of this way I've chosen to parent, and maybe if I change it, this difficulty will subside. Yeah,
basically. I mean, it's the age-old, my kid is struggling, I want to change something to fix it question, right?
I get that.
I guess you don't even need to parent intentionally probably to be faced with that. It's like, my kid's hanging out with the wrong kids at school, or...
Yeah, I would say, though, if you are parenting in a way that is not the same as the mainstream, you might be more susceptible to this because I feel like it's seen like that you're not doing the default thing. So because it's not kind of what everybody else does, it's more likely that it could be like contributing to this challenge.
That's true.
Don't believe that, but I think that might be what people get kind of stuck on.
Yeah, I mean, especially for, like, I've definitely seen a peace of mind that can come with just going with the flow, just going with what everyone else does. So like, kids are struggling with school. Very few parents will allow themselves to enter into the headspace of, well, what if we just didn't send them to school?
Right.
And since that feels so far away, there's like other things we can do, give them $100 if they get straight A's or whatever, but we don't really have to do the really hard work of like questioning everything here, right? And so, right, if you're trying to parent more intentionally in any respect, you're giving yourself more options, and giving yourself more options tends to make things harder, right? And so, when this happens, I think all sorts of questions can come into your mind. There can be like a defeatist attitude of like, what's the point in even working so hard at this if it doesn't seem like it's working right now?
Right.
Maybe you say you moved towards a more self-directed lifestyle for your kid, but you're not feeling the connection that you felt was kind of promised in various literature or Facebook groups or whatever. Or you thought your kid would have this explosion of creativity and learning, and that's not happening, or whatever. Like there's just something that's not going perfectly, and it feels extra hard, and part of you wonders if it's your fault.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk just like briefly about how we handle stuff like that, because I think we've had thoughts or discussions like, hey, we're parenting in this way, allowing our kids these certain freedoms. In this moment, it doesn't feel like this one aspect is working perfectly. So what do we do now? Can you dive into?
Yeah, I mean, I think when that happens, it's tempting to go towards another option because you just want to change it, right? And you just want to fix it. So I think that what we have done in those situations, and what I know others have done too, is kind of, and it doesn't always happen right away, and it doesn't always happen easily. It's almost like we eventually get to this, right? Is to kind of look at, okay, this thing doesn't feel like it's working right now. Like this one small particular thing, like we're having this challenge with this kid, or this child is feeling like he's really struggling in this area. We would like to be able to support him through that and to help him. And then you kind of think like, okay, here are all the different options in front of us, right? And they could be a whole range of different things. And I think what we ultimately come around to is to remind ourselves of our priorities for our kids and for our family, and then to kind of, again, walk towards the option that is most in line with those priorities. So for us, that would, again, be like being connected to our kids and them having the freedom to kind of live life on their own terms, right? So there are certain options that are going to be in front of us that are just definitely not going to keep us in line with those priorities. And we can kind of just throw those out right away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, and it reminds me of the conversation around our, how we handle turbulent times in our own lives, which is to say, try to intentionally peel it back and don't get so hyper focused on one issue. Because I'm like, the image that comes to mind is like the guy or gal standing in front of the dam, and like there's a bunch of leaks in the dam. So they put one finger in one hole, and then a squirt comes over here, and then they move their finger to the new hole, but then the old hole starts squirting water in their face, right? It's like the old cartoon silly image. I don't know. You didn't get to watch a lot of cartoons. I was not
a big cartoon watcher, so
as a kid,
I'm enjoying your hand motions a lot, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, maybe we can give it to our patrons, and I can do the hand motions in the video. But the idea being that, like, so you're sitting there, and the weakest link in the chain of your lifestyle or your relationship with your kids or their self-directed education journey has presented itself to you. And there's going to be a part of you that wants to say, oh man, because at any given point, something has to be the biggest problem in your life, right? Mm-hmm. So like that can be a big or small or in between, but something is the biggest problem. And when the biggest problem is there, it's very tempting to want to do something right away to fix that biggest problem. Mm-hmm. And, in the case of some conversations in our One Free Family Facebook group, it's like, well, I want my kid to be making more friends. Like that's the biggest concern for me in my family's life right now. And it's like, well, okay, I hear that. That can be really, I've had concerns like that. Like, am I providing enough opportunity for connection with my kids? And I remember though that I'm parenting in this way. And the reason we arrived at this, our logical minds, when we were trying to figure out the best solution for us, was like, we were trying to look at the big picture and start with the principle of, well, I want my kids to have friends, sure, but I really want them to be pursuing the things they're interested in. Sometimes that's making new friends. Sometimes it's not. And then I think, okay, my governing principle, the reason I'm parenting this way is not so my kid will have the maximum number of friends. So what is the reason I'm parenting this way? Well, I hope to help my kids to feel self-actualized and pursue a purpose-driven life on their own terms, not living to please me, but living to kind of figure out what they want from the world. So where does this problem around them not getting out enough and not making enough friends, like where does that fit in? Is that a problem that prevents this major goal that I want for them? Because if it is, then maybe I do need to take some action in the meantime. Right. But if it's not, maybe I need to remember that the reason I'm parenting this way in the first place is because actually other things were more important to me. Right. When I started, and like this, well, I would prefer not to have to put this in the nice to have and not the need to have column. I'd rather just them have both. I might need to have to stick to my guns and prioritize the thing that got me to this parenting way in the first place.
Yeah. Right? And I think that I've had that conversation with many people actually. And I think it was my friend Julie who kind of first planted that idea in my head of when, and she's another unschooling parent. So we were talking specifically about the decision to kind of unschool and support our kids to be self-directed. And we were talking about when challenges come up. And that's what she said. When these things come up that concern me or that make me feel a little worried or anxious because they look so different than what I've always told a childhood should look like, I go back and I like re-examine my priorities and why I chose this. And if those still feel like my priorities, then I'm able to kind of move out from under that fear because I know that we are still living in a way that's aligned with our priorities. And that was really powerful to me. And that's really helped me a lot in kind of moving through concerns about stuff that is or is not happening with my kids.
Yeah, I really like that. I think the temptation is to, like, when you're a parent and you care about someone more than you even care about yourself, which is, I think, the experience of many parents when our kids are really struggling, or we even just perceive that something could cause them to struggle in the future. Right. The parenting brain is tricky in this way. Our tendency is to want to just fix it, right? It's like, oh, I'm just going to make this go away now. I see my kids struggling with meeting new people. I'm just going to send them someplace where they're going to meet new people. I can do that. I'm the parent. I'm the one who makes the rules, or,
and I want to take care of them. And this is how I think I need to do it. Yeah. I have to say too, that I've had to work really hard, and I still have to work really hard on not imposing my own set of preferences and values on my kids, because I could look at the way that my kids choose to spend their time, and I could think about myself now, and I could think about myself as a kid and just be like, what the heck? Like, I would never spend my time that way. I would do all of these things. And it's easy to kind of get caught up in kind of viewing everything just from my own lens and thus thinking that their decisions aren't the best for them. And so I have to be really careful about stepping back and thinking, like, are they content with what they're doing? Are they seeming fulfilled, even if it's not what I would choose?
Well, and sometimes your kids even won't seem fulfilled, and they're still choosing the thing that is keeping them the most fulfilled, if that makes sense.
No, I think...
Like, I can recall being a teenager, let's say, and no amount of, like, unschooling or whatever was going to fix all the things I was dealing with.
Well, that's the other piece, right? Like, choosing to parent intentionally, whether it's homeschooling or unschooling or gentle parenting with your kids in school or whatever your kind of bigger intentional choices are, it's not like it's going to create a bubble around your kids from ever experiencing hardship or challenge.
Unschooling won't stop problems or the lack of school or whatever, or being self-directed isn't going to stop problems just by looking at adults. Adults are pretty self-directed and have tons of problems.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's a perfect parallel because if you think of adults, a lot of adults who have a ton of challenges also potentially didn't have a lot of freedom in childhood. And if you've got kids who... Like, so they're potentially still kind of being, I think, dealing with a lot of things from when they were kids. That's fine.
And I'm simply putting forth that flipping the switch and giving your kid control over their own life isn't going to make all their problems go away.
No, and even if they've had that from the beginning, right? Exactly. If you've been living this life since your child was born and creating this environment for them, human beings just are going to encounter harder times. They're going to encounter times when they make choices that they don't really want to be making, and we can support them to learn about like what that feeling is and to learn about how to pivot. It's not a protection from ever experiencing hard times.
Right. And so as you're sitting there as a parent and you're, really questioning, you're in this turbulent time, very similar to like what we talked about in our life, and you're trying to figure out what to do about it, I would want to step away from trying to fix any specific issue, which my tendency is to believe that specific issues are actually symptoms of a cause rather than the cause. So sometimes it feels like, well, if my kids just didn't want to play so many video games, I could be happy with this whole unschooling thing or whatever, right? But that's probably not actually the thing. Like, because if they weren't playing so many video games, maybe you'd be concerned about the food they were eating, right? But just something feels like the biggest problem, and that just feels like what's on one's plate at the time. I would try to recognize, or get back to basics with myself and say, okay, is there something about this lifestyle that isn't fulfilling for me?
Big.
Do I have my kids at home all the time? Am I just not the type of person that has the energy to float an unschooling lifestyle every day as the main parent
Do
who's
we
at
need
home?
to change some things as a family about my lifestyle so that I can be more fulfilled and well and whole?
Right. Yeah. Keep turning over rocks, right? Consider talking to a kid about a self-directed learning center like Big Fish or local Sudbury school or a free school.
Right. We for sure don't want to advocate for parents kind of suffering through.
No.
Yeah.
Or a Montessori school, or again, just trying to figure out what everyone's goals are, what everyone's realistic expectations are, and how we can try to meet those all to the best degree possible. And understanding that sometimes everyone has goals and priorities, and sometimes all those can't get met. And sometimes that's okay. And you ultimately still do have to decide something, because sitting around and just feeling paralyzed and worried is not going to change anything. I mean, ultimately, I think a lot of these things tend to kind of work themselves out. But the way we optimize, or the way we're going to feel best about things anyway after, is knowing that we just didn't let inertia carry us to this new state of being, that we sat with it. We sat with the hard parts. We tried to figure it out. And at least we can look back someday and say, hey man, we tried our best, we did what we could with the information we had at the time, and here's where we are at now.
Yeah. And it's hard. I definitely have gone through times when I questioned a lot more about our decisions, and then times when I felt more confident about them, and totally want to put out there that I get that some of this is easier said than done, but we're just kind of trying to plant seeds and and hold space for you if that's where you are, and just offer some level of understanding and ideas and support.
Yeah. So wish us luck as we carry on through. We have no big answers in terms of
spoiler alert, we don't really know what's happening yet, but
but
we
I
have
thought it might be
some
fun
things we're trying
for all the people that are out there who have come to care about us and our family and what's going on. And sometimes you see a little bit of silence from podcasts you enjoy or people you like to read or whatever, and you wonder what's going on. So we just wanted to bring you into the loop because we care about you guys and trust you and are excited to bring you along our journey wherever it takes us, hopefully to good places.
Ever as grateful for all of you. And if you are still not with us in the One Free Family Facebook group, you can come find us and all of our awesome friends there. There's a ton of just great support and conversation that happens in there all the time. It's just One Free Family.
Just look for it on
group
Facebook.
On Facebook. You'll find it.
Well said.
I believe it. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on this journey with us. And remember that each moment is a new opportunity to be the parent that you want to be.
Love you guys. See you sooner next time.